Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to video game news. We're starting pretty late today on Friday, July 17th, 2026. We'll do a little bit of warm up and then jump into the video game news. We'll start by scrolling down this 24-hour peak concurrent chart from SteamDB. Yeah, the reason I'm starting late is my sleep schedule is a mess, and certainly that turned into a nightmare yesterday as I was getting my new smart dryer delivered. Can't really say it's installed correctly. It really needed the side vent configured, and I contacted customer service before. They said it should be no problem. They totally lied. The subcontractors said we don't do that. I called customer service again, and they said we don't do that. So now I have a dryer that is hooked up, but it's hooked up totally, in my opinion, the wrong way, and is only a matter of time when the flexible foil vent is going to just be completely full of lint again, which was the problem with the previous one, because it's snaking around in ways that it should not be snaking around. And honestly, I don't know if you should have flexible vents ever. It certainly would be harder using telescoping or periscoping vents, which is what I think you should probably have, but it certainly would be harder to configure an exhaust on the back with a periscoping telescoping vent. But I mean, basically what you have to do is you just have to rip it off or take it apart before you start moving the dryer, which, yeah, that's really the only thing the telescoping vent helps you with, is that the dryer can move around and be installed a little bit easier and quicker. And I suppose if you had an exhaust vent that was almost exactly in line with where the dryer is, which is really what I should have, a crimple foil connection wouldn't be that big of a deal, because it would just be a straight shot back for the most part. But yeah, right now it's going out the dryer, to the left, up, to the right some more, to the right some more, forward in 3 dimensions from the wall, and then to the right again, which, yeah, that sounds like a puzzle maze solution, not a straight shot as far as things go. And there's just not a lot of room away from the wall. Even the gas connection really is rather protruding from the wall. It would make a lot more sense to think that the entire back of the gas dryer should just be removable. Of course, they want to keep lint and vent and dust out of it, so that's kind of the things. And with a gas dryer, you do have to exhaust outside, where an electric dryer you could theoretically vent inside the house. It's not a great solution, but it is a possibility. It does seem like it is using a ton less electricity, but being a smart device, it does kind of wake up and try and connect to its terrible app. The reason I say the app is terrible is because its connectivity is poor, to say the least. And the smart features, while I will say they are well thought out, they are also kind of minimal. Like, a lot of it sounds like there could be new features that, when you think about it more, it probably is the case that it wouldn't make a lot of sense. For instance, it doesn't have a delayed start, and in most of our smart devices, scheduling things and delayed starts are just the default thing you would have. But then when you kind of think about it, you're talking about wet clothes, so is there ever a smart point in which you would take wet clothes from a washing machine and delay the start to dry? No. And a lot of features are like that, where to actually turn on the dryer, you have to be in front of the dryer pressing the buttons. It doesn't really replace a broken panel, and I bet that is probably very much intentional, in that they just don't want you to be able to avoid paying service fees, because they're part replacements, and these are GE parts, but it's pretty much true for all washers and dryers, are ridiculously expensive. Like the metal shoe drying rack, which mine did not come with but could use, is $150. It is absolutely ridiculous to pay $150 for what is maybe heat coated pieces of metal rod. I would assume it's somewhat heat treated and or powder coated in a way to resist heat, but that doesn't bring it up beyond being $40. They are easily getting $100 of pure profit on something like that, and that is probably true for most of the parts. And it certainly does go to show the disposable nature of a lot of even large appliances now, in that it's just only a few more $100s to get something brand new instead of repairing and keeping what you have. That wasn't really the case in my instance. I imagine by the time I paid somebody to service the electric one I had before, I would be paying $500 or $600 anyways. Plus that doesn't really move over the gas, which it should have been gas all along. Also, my last dryer's buttons really sucked. Like, you'd press the button and it would just reject it, and so you just have to like press and hold the buttons like crazy. This one works perfectly. You press the button, it responds like any electronic device should do. It is kind of weird that they aren't all stackable designs now. Like, I got one that isn't stackable, so it's not a flat top, it's like a sloped top, and it almost certainly doesn't change anything internally. So it would just be nice for them to always have a flat top, so you have a surface even if you're not going to stack them. Maybe there's internal reasons why they do slope tops, so you know you can't stack it, because it's not reinforced enough to hold the weight of a washer on top. The new one has a side swing door, which surprisingly is way more helpful than I thought it was going to be. I didn't even think about which way the door swing, but my old dryers swing downward, and yeah, that was a problem. The area it's in is kind of tight, and the door swinging open downward was taking up a few more feet, or a foot and a half or so, of where I could not stand, and I could not easily reach into the drum. The drum light in the new dryer also is actually a lot brighter too. Let's look at the most wishlisted games now. But yeah, as far as smart features, there's like one downloaded feature in which you have to pick what feature that would be, as far as one extra downloaded mode. And there are 3 options there, none of which are super exciting. I've already emailed them suggesting a timed scheduled towel warmer mode, which that is the one scenario where scheduled kind of does make some sense, is if you already had dried towels. So you did a load of towels, they're dry in the dryer, but you just want to leave them in the dryer, and then at 6 in the morning when you take your morning shower, it comes on for 10 minutes and warms up all the towels in the dryer. You go and grab one and leave the rest in there. Like, that would be a nice little feature there. Wasteful on electricity certainly, but that would be true for any towel warmer. But yeah, what you can actually install are 3 modes that are pretty simplistic, but the next feature is actually very nice in that you can adjust the settings and it will remember the adjusted settings on all of the other cycles. Although I've found that you can't actually adjust the settings and it work on the app. The app is just really bad, I think, at communicating, or it may very well be trying to communicate via Bluetooth instead of over Wi-Fi. You set it up pairing via Bluetooth, this model. Yeah, I had a lot of trouble setting up the app to begin with because I bought a GE dryer and I misread it, the logo, and thought it said LG. So I was trying to find some QR code for an LG smart dryer and no such thing existed. Now weirdly, I think LG and GE may very well be owned by the same company at this point, and almost certainly most of this stuff is being built in the same factories, but the smarts may be separated out as far as a smart app goes. But yeah, being able to set the settings, there are weirdnesses certainly, as far as I got apparently a cheaper model that only lets you turn the beep on and off instead of having different levels of audio, which sounds kind of crazy, but I imagine the beeper in it is really just a simplistic little Pico buzzer and not a real speaker. But yeah, and then it has an interesting concept of a washer link, which might push me to eventually get a new washer that's a GE, in that whatever dial you spin it to, say you do a load of delicates on the washer, if the washer link is linked to the dryer, then the dryer just automatically will be on delicate cycle, so you don't have to spin two dials, which isn't that big of a deal, but who knows. If you are arthritic or have other ADA problems, I don't know if the dryer still is the right one for you, but it would potentially help a little. The fact that my non-stackable version has the buttons at the back is weird. It's really weird that the buttons would ever be at the back of a thing. I guess maybe if you don't want kids playing with it, but I imagine kids still would just play on it, and the sloped roof would have kids climb up there and slide back down potentially, and fall off the dryer. You just generally don't let kids in the laundry room anyways as a parent until they're old enough to be trusted. But yeah, the buttons being in the back is not going to be helpful for people like in a wheelchair or short of stature or anything like that. The dials and the buttons that they have are not particularly the best things for accessibility. So yeah, I don't think they're really working that way, and the smart app isn't going to be helpful there, in that you really can't turn the system on or set the settings, as far as I can tell, via a phone app, which that's where I think it would be way more helpful, which I may very well send that some feedback to and say, hey, like the idea that there's an app generally means you can turn things on. Although, in fairness, if you're also disabled enough to not be able to turn the dials, you're very possibly disabled enough that you wouldn't be able to load a washer dryer anyways. So you just need somebody to do your laundry for you. But yeah, that's a great example of accessibility, where a lot of times manufacturers don't care and don't try, and because there isn't even a single step of effort put to go in that direction, it does very quickly become an all or nothing scenario where either you can do everything or you can't do any of it. where there's plenty of people who are slightly disabled. They could do some of it, but not all of it. Like, very rarely is someone so disabled that they're just like paraplegic. But yeah, there's really only about 3, maybe 4 smart features. And so if I was just looking for a smart dryer, this is not the dryer I would have picked. This dryer was recommended as being a good dryer, despite the fact that it only has 1-year warranty, which is really, really low, and they're starting to cheap out, I think, on warranties in general. But also, I don't know how useful a warranty really is, because if every part is made incredibly cheap and designed to break, then what's the use of fixing one thing and then the next thing breaking a couple months later once it's out of warranty, or just having to deal with multiple service calls? And so the thought, and I hope I got a good suggestion here, is that this unit is actually just really stable and won't need the warranty, hopefully. But yeah, it is not a good state as far as dryers and washers, and part of the reason why they don't have a lot of smarts in them is because there's very few countries, Asian countries in particular, where most of the smart devices are designed for forest, and a lot of they use big American washers and dryers. Like, the humidity levels and everything are just different. And in fact, that's one thing. There is literally a damp alert built into the dryer where it will beep at you saying, hey, if you want to take some stuff out and go hang it on a rope outside, we'll tell you right at the perfect time to go air dry this. And I guess you might think about doing that for a quilt or something. I don't think it's going to really save you that much electricity, although who knows, even a little savings might be useful. But yeah, that is definitely something more that would happen in like Japan. And if I was going to go with a really smart device, I would have gotten a combined unit that does washing and drying all in one, so you don't have to move things over, which very possibly would have been the top of the line Samsung. Now, people will tell you don't buy Samsung washer and dryers, and for the most part that does seem to be accurate, but the top of the line combined unit is the only one so far that has been really good as a combined condenser unit washer and dryer. And that isn't completely eliminated for some distant point in the future, but if I got the Samsung there, I'd almost certainly not be able to do a washer link connection to the GE. There's visually at least some reason why you might want things to match. But yeah, a lot of washers and dryers also have features that I personally would just never use, like the steam dry or steam wash type thought is intriguing, but not something that really concerns me too much. Better venting and avoiding of mildew and mold growing in the washing machine is much more important. And a lot of the auto dispenser stuff is nice as a concept, but is also just adding a lot of more features that could break, more pieces of things that could break. Yeah. I really had hoped to not have to start thinking about replacing washers and dryers until I got my garage a lot more empty. That didn't happen, so that is still my hope. Now, the dryer model I got is already like 4 or 5 years old, so although in fairness, do you really need to reinvent the wheel every single year with different models on washers and dryers? That is a weirdness certainly too, is that what actually is being shown in the stores as far as washers, dryers, refrigerators are often things that have been sitting around in a factory, or more likely in a Lowe's or Home Depot, for years upon years. Yeah, there isn't that much turnaround for those kinds of things, and unless you're going to order something directly from the manufacturer, that is likely you're going to get something that's several years old and probably get it discounted a little bit because of that, although they're already marked up quite a bit. The delivery was really a nightmare as far as I was not available. I was half asleep and stuck in the bathroom or on the phone the whole time, so I literally only saw a couple of minutes of them installing it, so I have no idea. I saw them taking it off the back of the truck for a minute, basically, is all I saw. I didn't see them install it at all. So I have no idea if they installed it right. I can say I've done several loads, and so far it hasn't set off my gas alarm. I've determined the best way to avoid my water heater's gas alarm being set off after dusting its volt or organic compound sensor, which may have also been a big problem, is to just have it always heat water. So I'll have to see between these two changes whether the amount of gas on my bill goes up a lot or not. It may not matter. But yeah, that is pretty typical in the water heater, is to just have one temperature and leave it at one temperature. And technically it's more efficient to leave it at one temperature, but that is a changing thing when depending on how different the temperatures really could be. Still, for the most part, to get into the Tuya smart home system, which is what I'm trying to get everything into, instead of having yet another separate app, it is easier just to have a Zigbee plug on a gas dryer, and you don't need any kind of special plug there. Maybe a 15 amp instead of a 10 amp, but that's basically it. And I have noticed already, though, as I've been configuring it, that because it has the Wi-Fi connection, it does wake up after a few minutes and probably connect to the Wi-Fi again, which uses a little bit of power. So I'm seeing that it uses somewhere, I think, below 25 milliamps, although I may tell you by Monday it actually uses a lot more than 25 milliamps when it wakes up and connects. But yeah, it is using some amount of electricity. But by having just a Tuya smart monitoring plug on it, I can put it in Tuya and just say, hey, the dryer is done because it stopped using a certain amount of electricity. Whereas its built-in app has more integrated intelligence, in that you can turn on a notification for 5 or 10 minutes before it's done with the dryer cycle, or when it's done. And you can also get other kinds of notifications, which the smart monitoring plug just won't be able to do. But yeah, you could see if you were like the landlord or the maintenance guy, you might have the custom app, and then you might just have the homeowners or the renters with the Tuya app to give them only one app to install. Yeah. Speaking of the Tuya app, which is all I've really been doing over the past couple days other than playing Oracle of Ages, which I'll talk about that too. It turns out there are more Outlook and Google things that you can now integrate other than just Google Calendar. So yeah, there may very well be a case where you can just integrate things into Google Drive or Outlook emails or something along that line to trigger different things, Outlook calendars. You're going to have to get really creative though for it to make sense, and I'll have to think about it myself to figure out how it would make sense to integrate those services. Pretty obviously they want you to integrate those services because they want to be able to advertise to you better or build up their AI suggestions better with more data. And yeah, certainly if you don't trust Tuya and you think it's got backdoors to the Chinese government, which very possibly every Chinese app does, and then you probably wouldn't want to integrate those things if you actually think that's a concern, them seeing your emails. Nowadays most of my emails are just bills and ads. Like the last time someone personally emailed me anything probably was years upon years ago. And I would argue that there's probably more information in phone calls and text messages that are getting monitored by the US government than there are personal information in emails that are being seen by anybody else. Yeah, Oracle of Ages really is kind of a nightmare Zelda game. It's an early Game Boy Color version of the game, of a Zelda game, but it is also half a game in that a lot of stuff you just cannot get unless you link it to the other Seasons game. And so in emulation, I don't see any way you're going to be able to connect it to a Seasons game and have that kind of linked play experience, which I don't know how that would even really work. But yeah, there are elements that are redone later on in like Ocarina of Time. So it's kind of interesting to see where these concepts originally came from. But then there's also just some really Pokemon-esque. You've got to buy 2 copies of 2 different games to have the full experience. Or you have to buy 2 different games at least. And yeah, it's a lot of wandering around, a lot of having to go to a walkthrough. It definitely is not making it easy to figure out what to do, which particularly gets harder when you eventually get the ability to, at any point on the map, go from the past to the present, and there are entire solutions that require you to just constantly swap back and forth in the past and present. Still playing Memento Mori and Pokemon TCG Pocket. Really nothing super new to say there. Barely even getting around to actually playing those. And yeah, now that the dryer is done, I can start to think about maybe getting back to a little bit more cleaning and decluttering. Making a decent amount of progress as far as the replacements for my macros, so I'm hoping that that will run particularly smoothly. But I am running into a problem of trying to open tabs, windows in the same tab, instead of always opening in a new tab, which if I can't fix that, that's not really that big of a deal, but it would just have a bunch of tabs left open. Although I could certainly also just have them set themselves up to close after a certain amount of time. And even if I didn't have them close themselves, it kind of wouldn't matter because they'd be on the left side of the tabs anyways. But yeah, I had to go in and adjust the search for links on Video Games Chronicle because I was finding some links to some articles that actually weren't even showing up on the page. But I do think I am slowly taking steps to being pretty close to being finished. Although I need to do a lot more testing and verification on making sure it saves links that have already been seen. Otherwise, we're going to run into a real problem of things not duplicate news stories being opened up. I still am doing a little bit of a follow list cleanup, but it definitely doesn't seem like the number is changing that much. So yeah, particularly with an off day where I really wasn't accomplishing anything yesterday. One stream seems to add as many games as I am removing from the follow list. I think some of that is also the follow list cleanup because it reset has me looking at games I've already looked at. Obviously I'm not playing any other games other than Oracle of Ages, which, yeah, that's a problem. YouTube came out with a further defining video, explanation video of inauthentic content as far as whether they want you in the YouTube partner program. I want to look at this game. I don't recognize that game. And there definitely is a question, and I've gotten one person's feedback to say that my YouTube shorts probably do fall under that category of inauthentic content. It really, like everything on YouTube, is just going to depend on who looks at it, if anybody looks at it. And frankly, I'm not anywhere close to being in the YouTube partner program anyway, so continuing to do shorts to get enough watch hours to then be in the YouTube partner program, then getting rejected by the YouTube partner program, and then like deleting all the shorts still is a potentially viable solution there. It would suck to delete all the shorts, but yeah, if they help in the short term and then just have to be deleted in the long term, that's still better success than what I'm likely to have not doing the shorts. I do still plan on putting on text to speech, but there is certainly undeniably the fact that the YouTube shorts I'm making are done via template, via automation, and using Steam pages, and even adding text to speech to read the description of the Steam pages isn't really adding any commentary, critique, or review. In this case, we're not concerned about fair use or copyright laws, as this is ad copy, and the game developers are more than happy for me to make these shorts as far as I can tell. Although sometimes people do comment on the shorts like I'm the creator of the game and that they want help or more information. It is absolutely not viable to do the shorts, even when I'm eliminating like AI games and only adding a few things to the follow list or making shorts from them. It's still absolutely not viable to try and do anything bespoke per short, like going in there and doing a voice line and describing the game or why it's interesting to me. If I did that, I would only do it for games I'm already covering, which that is a thought. Certainly I don't think it makes a lot of sense to do that, but it is certainly a thought where I could make the same kind of YouTube shorts and then link directly to games that I've made pre-recorded footage of. That is what they are telling you to do with shorts now, is to really make them teasers to a longer video. This came out August 2023 and apparently I rejected it for some reason. I will correct that and put that on the wish list. It is very possible, but no, weirdly it seems like this game was review bombed. So maybe there's a whole controversy that also happened that I'm just not recognizing. Let's see. Grinding, frustrating, very disappointed. Chinese translations. So apparently the Chinese people were not happy with the translation, which seems to happen a lot, although arguably that's not a review bomb, or it really shouldn't be considered a review bomb. And then they gave an arrogant response, and yeah, that's probably why they took it off there. And this is the problem with review bombs. Way more of a problem than the AI and losing sales because you put AI in your game. Yeah, you're disenfranchising lots of reviewers when you can claim it's off topic when it seems very on topic, compared to disenfranchising a single developer / publisher when you force them to admit the truth that they used AI. I don't know if I mentioned this in the last stream, but I'll mention it again. According to iFixit, they are not getting any more Steam Deck LCD components. And so iFixit is going to look for different sources for replacement components, but suffice it to say, any manufacturing deals for repair parts for the LCD in particular seem to have finished, and we probably are not even 6 months away from seeing refurbed Steam Decks just being completely removed as far as LCDs go. Like, it may very well be that they enjoy the fantasy of getting a $300 LCD refurbed, but I think the reality of the scenario really highlights now that they should just be listing refurbed OLEDs just to be in line with the prices of everything else. What's the point of having a really low price for a product that's never going to be available for purchase? Yeah, and you are certainly at this point taking your chances if you got a Steam Deck LCD. I can't continue to recommend an LCD, even refurbed, even though that might be very cheap for you, knowing that it's going to potentially get really hard to repair anything if it breaks, which includes also replacing the battery, which that is the thing that seemed like it might be the next thing. Speaking of which, I think my USB-C connection on my phone is finally starting to break, and it's time for me to move over to my new phone. The battery has been shot for probably 2 years, but I thought I'd try and stretch it out and not spend the extra energy moving it over, but it is almost certainly time to move things over now. Which that is yet one more project that I need to do, which I still haven't moved the router over either. Yeah. Things keep happening, and the amount of progress one has to do to maintain pace with things keeping happening is a problem. I did an experiment, and this experiment was risky and proven to be wrong, so we're going to once again have all of the news stories in random cycled order. Video Games Chronicle, then a Gamatsu, then a GameDeveloper.com, then a Steam game type stuff, instead of all of them in one specific grouping for each source. I'm trying to do something with the adding URL to the title, and it's not working. Probably because adding a URL to the title is probably happening after UI Vision tries to run its macros. I actually don't really know, but it's not working, and it won't matter if it works or not in the long run if I can just replace the news macros completely. I am still giving some thought as far as trying to make a Violent Monkey script to upload videos. I question heavily, though, whether that would ever work. Oh, one thing about YouTube Shorts, too, is that they're really connecting to the idea of related videos. So it does make a lot of sense to, when I make a YouTube short going forward, have the date of the live stream in which I looked at that YouTube short and make that be a related video, even though more than likely I won't say too much about that specific game in that related video. It still is related, and you can't do a related video to a timestamp, so there is no point where you click the related video and actually go to 2 or 3 hours into the stream where you would actually see that game being looked at. Which, yeah, that's kind of weird. But yeah, there's room for doing related videos on the YouTube shorts and crossing over. And that is very much how they're describing shorts now, is that this is just teasers / commercials for people to transfer that audience back to long form. Even YouTube wants people to get away from the TikTok shorts concept and get back into longer form videos, although what they want is 10-15 minute videos, not hour-long playthroughs. in video games. Although video game playthroughs that are 45 minutes to an hour, not really that long. Alright, so Video Games Chronicle says July's PlayStation Plus games catalog includes A Rise of Ronin and Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. There is also slick deals right now for the family membership of Nintendo Switch Online, which I've never seen that on sale before. So that is slightly interesting there. Of course, Nintendo Switch Online doesn't offer too much there. I'm going to increasingly decide not to cover things that look like mobile games or visual novel games. And I think I got it so the hotkeys will actually close something, but then I just hit the shift button and I don't think it works. That didn't work. Let's see if the C button works. No. So no, the hotkeys are still not working as far as I can tell, as far as just closing a tab. Gamatsu says Machine Party launches July 30th. This looks like a friend swap game if I was to guess. Let's see. Gaming on Linux says Thief Gold enters the Good Old Games Preservation Program after its first community vote. Okay. But the preservation program really means nothing. It is a fancy title for saying Good Old Games is going to do the same thing that they were doing before. And if anything, there is a danger that at some point they may say, alright, all the games now that we have in the preservation program are what we're going to sell on Good Old Games and support, and anything else we sell, we're not going to guarantee that it actually runs on modern computers. Here's GameDeveloper.com with a story we talked about before, in that the Dead Space co-creator Glenn Schofield has retired. Kind of young, but also not the worst idea either, because yeah, he just we probably should have more stories like Glenn Schofield's, really, to talk more broadly. There should be people that are in the industry and try to form their own companies and try to make their own games and fail, and then either keep on trying or retire / leave the game industry. I question if he's really going to be retired. But yeah, for as many game developers that get laid off and fired, most of them either end up just working for a different developer or leaving the game industry altogether. Whereas at least Glenn Schofield tried with his Calypso Protocol game, and we really do need more people to try. He obviously didn't seem to me like a good leader, and that was probably a big part of the failure of the Calypso Protocol, but he also got screwed over, I think, quite a bit by them remaking Dead Space and releasing it just to crush competition, which that story really should be talked about way more, is how there was a blatant effort to crush competition there. By remaking Dead Space when they wouldn't have remade Dead Space anyways. Speaking of remasters, not remakes, apparently it has been admitted that there will be remasters of Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas. This is because Obsidian has been given the reins to make a new Fallout game instead of Bethesda, and Todd Howard came out and did an announcement to basically say, hey, I'm still in charge and we're still doing things. So yeah. I don't know if I really believe that Todd Howard is really in charge, and I definitely don't believe he should be in charge. But yeah, the idea of remastering New Vegas or Fallout 3 to me sounds like they probably are just going to try to put it on a slightly new engine and squeeze in a marketplace and horse armor and nonsense like that. Where, yeah, I don't think any recent remaster for a Bethesda game has been particularly good. Yeah. At a certain level, the only way a remaster would interest me for Fallout 3 or Fallout New Vegas is if it was actually on a completely different engine, and that at that point feels like it would be close enough to call it a remake. I don't know if you really want a Fallout 3 or a Fallout New Vegas remake though, because it's such an open world RPG experience anyways. Remaking things is kind of unnecessary. Like, your experience is going to be so wildly different if you play the game differently anyways. Why would you need to, like, drastically change things? Maybe the controller system isn't good enough. I don't think that's really the case for those games. But yeah, I don't think you'd want to tell the story much differently, and I don't think you'd want to make it visually look drastically different, just better. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says laid off Elder Scrolls Online dev says players won't get new content at anything approaching the previous rate. ZeniMax said last week that its season's roadmap was shifting following the layoffs. I think that's pretty believable, but in fairness, I don't think it was particularly logical to continue to say you're making single-player Elder Scrolls games while you're also making Elder Scrolls Online. The two really shouldn't exist. Either you should have the Elder Scrolls Online be what Elder Scrolls is going forward, or you should have the people making content for Elder Scrolls Online moving that content over to the next Elder Scrolls game. Yeah. It is kind of a sharp contrast to like Warcraft and World of Warcraft. When World of Warcraft became popular, they definitely never made another Warcraft game as far as a single player experience. But yeah, that is very believable. Let's see, Ratchet & Clank Ranger Rumble pre-registration is now available. This feels almost like it's a mobile game. It's a free-to-play hero shooter game. Boy, does that seem like really late to the party to make a free-to-play game or a hero shooter game. And yeah, it is mobile centric. Yeah, just based on the graphics. This screams to me that at some point when this was greenlit, at least, they were kind of desperate for more money. Because, if anything, I think this is really just going to highlight that they aren't working fast enough on the next Ratchet & Clank main game. And this may very well be a PlayStation funded thing that now makes no sense at all. Gaming on Linux says SteamOS 3.8.15 brings performance fixes, and 3.8.23 beta is out too. Which, yeah, there is some issues. Apparently the red line of death for the steam machine is actually just a thermal warning that was programmed wrong, and so it was coming on way too early compared to when the steam machine was actually overheating. And apparently in the firmware they had programmed the red line of death backwards, which is kind of really easy to do on an LED strip. It's not super easy in that you could just take an LED strip and flip it around and change the wires and it would work, because they are diodes and diodes only go one way. But it is very easy to not understand that individually addressable LEDs get a code, and in that code is a serial number, and they will take the code from the largest serial number, strip that out, and send the rest of the code down the line. So less and less data as it goes down the line of LEDs. It would be, in a programmer's mind, very easy to think that the first LED would need the serial number 0 or 1, but no, the first LED needs the biggest number. And that is kind of the beauty of individually addressable LEDs too, in that means you can send a really long code and just hope it's long enough to hit all the LEDs, and you can cut the LED strip anywhere and it won't really affect anything. So as long as the code is big enough, if there are 4 individual addressable LEDs and the serial number starts at 6,000, it's just going to take 6,000, 599, 598, 597 and move the rest of the signal down to non-existent LEDs. The weirdness on that is that still some controllers are not programmed well, and they will send maybe only 32 signals instead of 256 signals. So it depends heavily on the controller, and the lav controllers let you tell the exact number of LEDs, which is helpful when they're doing effects, because if you want half of the LEDs to be red and half of the LEDs to blue, and it thinks it has 1,000 LEDs but there's only 500, well, it's going to be all blue, or it's going to be all red in that case. There's no relativity programmed into it. But overall, to get back to the red line of death, it does seem like the steam machine is not breaking in massive numbers as it seemed like it might have been. Steam machine is still rather expensive, but it's quiet and not as powerful as you would like. Certainly, I am still very much on the fence as far as whether I want to buy a steam machine and whether it really is going to do anything. The way the markets are going, paying $1,000 for a steam machine that might be delivered in 6 months might be quite the savings, although it might also be quite wasteful. Let's see, the former Epic VP has been appointed to Saber Interactive's Chief Business Office. Steve Allison will oversee publishing, marketing, and revenue opportunities, reporting directly to the CEO, Matthew Karch. This is from GameDeveloper.com. I don't recognize either one of these people, so I don't know if there's any bigger insight I can give on that. It seems like management is moving around, which really means just about nothing. Here we have a isekai referencing RPG Maker farming type game. And I say RPG Maker, but this might be like RPG Maker or Game Maker, as far as a newer version from the same people who brought you RPG Maker. It's probably easier just to call them Stardew Valley clones. You still get way too many of those. Way too many simple life farming simulators. If I thought there was more money in game development, I would have start to think there's a conspiracy to make a bunch of simple life farming simulator games to make that lifestyle seem appealing, because so many people are going to end up being peasants once again, just having to be sharecroppers or farmers. Although I don't know if that's really a plan of the global elite and their insane things. I think they straight up are just jumping to the thought that they are going to try and kill the vast majority of the 1%, because you only need so many farmers with tractors and robots these days. And even now we grow a ton of food. It's really a distribution problem and an economics problem of the way food is grown and handled. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle says an indie developer's PS5 game trailer is flooded with anti-Sony comments over disc backlash. Tito's trailer is now among many being downvoted for simply being on the PlayStation YouTube channel. This is, I think, a great example of where there are going to be some stray bullets when PlayStation just goes completely silent. And I imagine they are just trying to, this game developer is just trying to make the best of it. Well, I guess that is the example of why democracy appeals, is it gives people a forum to appropriately voice their complaints, even though in most cases that forum is pointless and nobody is really listening to the complaints. I can't say though that I'm really against it. Like, if it literally just has to become a toxic waste pool that you cannot be associated and do business with PlayStation because they're getting rid of discs, then I guess that's one of the few methods in which consumers can push back and fight back for the things they want. If it really was a supply and demand issue that controlled the economy, this is people demanding things and supply not being fulfilled. Yeah, let's see. Is this game of any interest? Doesn't look like it. Yeah. PlayStation Plus games catalog and classics lineup for July 2026 have been announced. Yeah. Let's see. Valve has announced the theme sales events for the first half of 2027. They have done this pretty consistently over the past few years. It is decent information, and I've been doing it as post. Theoretically, you could do it as a short, but I just don't see a real reason to do it that way. You could probably do it as a calendar too. The Steam Summer Sale for 2027 is July 24th through 28th. Spring sales March 18th through 25th. Those are the big ones to pay attention to. The winter sale is December 17th through the 4th for 2026. None of these are typically questionable as to how long they go in anyways. But yeah, notice they have bolted the 4 big sales, and arguably with every sale, depending on how many games you still have left to buy, the amount of discount is questionable, particularly when you have games that maybe the base game goes down to $5, but then there's 50 DLCs that bring it back up to $80 to have the full experience. Let's see, the Pokemon Go owner, the new owner, Scopely, reorganizes the Stumble Guys team, which kind of means it has nothing to do with Pokemon Go, so the headline really should be Scopely / reorganizes, or quote, reorganizes Stumble Guys team. Basically, this is they've laid off a couple of people, and they're just calling it a reorganization. Like, technically, I guess if you're legally required to say reorganization does not include any layoffs at all, that might be interesting, but I do not believe the case. I think it's very easy to lay off a couple of people and say it's a reorganization. Let's see, Mario Tennis Fever updated to add a new Super Mario Galaxy themed court, racket, and match type. Okay, I don't know what the match type particularly is. Like, looking at this picture, I was thinking match might be the outfit, but no, that's not it at all. The racket and the court is the background, I would assume. That is an interesting point to mention, in that the updates to games, to Nintendo games, are starting to hit a point where you're not really getting a consistent game if you're offline, or if you're trying to archive the games. Still not particularly too bad, I would say. Yeah, the number of updates for Nintendo games are not super common or large. It's far from the idea of the number of updates on a Steam game and a PC game that can just be constantly updated. Yeah. If Nintendo really had big concerns about piracy, they probably would update things more often, but they probably would just update it with new security encryption keys. I had forgotten the whole game chat thought, which that definitely feels like a feature that they are just going to abandon. They may try to push it again in the next Nintendo console, but in the end, I think it is going to be a failure feature. And at a certain level, it's probably helpful to Nintendo to have small failures every now and then. That way their next console isn't just overall a huge failure. Because, yeah, if they could do anything to try and really break the cycle of Wii being great, Wii U being awful, Switch 1 being great, Switch 2 being kind of mediocre in that it just doesn't have enough games and isn't really that big of an incremental improvement on the Switch 1, that would be helpful too. But yeah, the whole game chat idea still doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, but I don't know if there's any real solution there. Discord looked like it was going to be the solution for a while, but honestly, I don't think too many people engage with that. And honestly, I think people are just not talking to each other at all. I frankly am not 100% certain that you wouldn't get some kind of weird AI character in the next Nintendo that is just pretending to be your friend and talking to you the whole time. I saw a Reddit post about a terrifying number of young boys with virtual girlfriends, and it's not just young boys, it's often also creepier older men And I'm sure there are some females in the mix too that are just falling deep into the realm of fantasy, and increasingly losing the ability to interact with real people, and in any kind of social situations, let alone romantic ones. I wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo fully embraced that and you did just have a Princess Peach assistant talking to you the whole time. Moving on, Gamatsu says Dispatch for Xbox Series launches July 29th. People very much in love with Dispatch as a game, which is a little surprising considering the actual gameplay I don't think is that much. It is very much a Telltale style visual novel type game as far as how it feels like it really plays out. But yeah, part of the pushback for PlayStation getting rid of discs is that there has been a lot more excitement and perhaps focus and work on emulating PlayStation games of the past. Here we can see on Gaming on Linux that the PlayStation 3 emulator RPC S3 has gotten 75% of all games playable. Now, playable is, I guess, the highest level of their rating system versus the 22% of games that are in-game. And then only like 1% is only to the intro, and almost nothing is just loadable, and almost nothing does nothing. Now, you still may need a pretty beefy computer to get really good performance with PlayStation 3 emulation. Arguably, PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 emulation should be perfect at this point. I don't think it is, but it could be close to perfect. However, it is a completely different situation when you start to think about PS4 and PS5 emulation. It could be potentially really easy if they can crack the encryption to get a PS4 and PS5 game to run. A lot of those PS4 and PS5 games also, though, are on PC and would just have a better performance anyways on to play the PC version, but there's not all of them. But yeah, because PS4 and PS5s are much closer to modern PCs, the emulation might be a lot easier, but there is probably more security. Suffice it to say, though, if you were always afraid of piracy, getting rid of discs has shown to be the absolute worst thing to announce, because the number of people who want to emulate these games now has gone up, and the number of people who are irate enough to actually contribute code has gone up quite a bit. And in the long run, we may see PlayStation just fail and be completely out of the video game industry, at which point emulation of PlayStation games is going to feel a lot more justifiable, as there just won't be a Sony Interactive Entertainment to even support if there was a reason why you wanted to support it. Yeah. Inherently, companies cross a line when they go from we need these consumers to like our product and be loyal to our product, and they forget that and move to the idea of we're just going to force consumers to buy whatever we sell because they have no choice. And in video games in particular, people do have choices, and even if it is just don't play video games at all. GameDeveloper.com, ZeniMax Online Studios leadership included in Xbox mass layoffs. The studio head, studio's operations director, and studio game director joined dozens of senior and lead positions cut by Xbox. So it does seem like, at least now, we're starting to see some actual managerial level layoffs, or firings or whatever. The thing there in particular is I imagine each manager has their own separate contract, and so it may very well have just taken more work to read through a manager's contract to lay them off than it would have been to lay off a at-will employee, associate level employee. Suffice it to say, if the estimation is that there were 14 levels of management, as much as 14 levels of management in Microsoft, there's plenty of other managers in manager level people who probably need to be laid off. A lot of them maybe just need to go back to being associate levels and won't accept that. And like, in fairness, if you are being demoted, you are effectively being laid off / fired from your current job in most scenarios. So yeah, but let's be realistic. It's still probably thousands to one. If there's been about 4,000 people laid off that were associate level employees, maybe it's hundreds to ones. Maybe there's been 40 managers that have been laid off, as far as I can tell. That would be my guess, just to pick a number. Is that so yeah, it's usually the low man on the totem pole that suffers, and there's a lot more men at the bottom of the totem pole than at the top. Anyways, but yeah, particularly ZeniMax Online seems like a studio that they're trying to gut and turn into just a maintenance studio. Which I will say, as far as Elder Scrolls Online, even though it's been consistently popular, it's never gotten the kind of coverage, and probably hasn't gotten the kind of player base that World of Warcraft got in its heyday. And yeah, I don't think any game is going to be ever as big as World of Warcraft was in the old days. Let's see, here we have a game called Sleeper Agent. Couch co-op game. You know, at some level, I do kind of wonder if I am going to start getting a little bit more desperate to make YouTube shorts. In this case, I think I am going to make a YouTube short, but yeah. The idea of 1 to 3 a day is a reasonable number of shorts to put out. Whereas if I'm struggling to even do 1 a day, I might feel a little weird. Although maybe 1 a day is good enough. The only success I think you really are going to have with shorts, though, is if you really flood with a lot of content, whether it's original, authentic content or not. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle says GTA 6 has the strongest pre-order campaign on record, is on track to sell 37 to 51 million in week 1, the analytics firm says. Well, that's kind of a shame, particularly as we still very much should not be pre-ordering games, and there is a lot of questions as far as what GTA 6 really will be in its main form versus in the $100 markup version of GTA 6. It does, if these numbers are accurate, which they may very well not be, it does also unfortunately continue to show that a lot of gamers are just sheep and will just buy games either because they imagine themselves content creators and they need to get the game on day one, or just because they are falling into hype cycles way too much. Link Empire here doesn't look particularly interesting. It definitely does feel like it's a little bit easier to evaluate games when there's fewer games, and you just know there's going to be fewer games that come out on Steam during the streams, which will mean fewer random games being added to the fault list. Gamatsu says Blaze Blue Entropy Effect X is coming to Switch 2 on August 13th alongside a major content update. That's a giant bell this character has with giant hair. Let's see, Gaming Online says the impressive Grand Scale real-time strategy Beyond All Reason gets a major engine upgrade with ARM64 support. I feel like we've already talked about that. Let's see, unions finally have gotten around to taking legal action against Microsoft for allegedly mishandling Xbox layoffs. The CWA Canada president Carmel Smith claims the company unlawfully fired people without giving notice to or discussing with the union, which in Canada either they have a contract or they have legal protections in Canada, which may not be the case. It very well may be the situation that CWA in the United States also files legal proceedings, and that it just takes lawyers longer than you would think to start those legal proceedings. Like, the law is never particularly fast. There's an update here with an Xbox spokesman providing a statement which says basically nothing. Apparently, the labor unions in the United States have also filed unfair labor practice charges against Microsoft. Which, yeah, they probably did mishandle it. Unfortunately, particularly in the United States, they may get away with it, or they may get a tiny slap on the wrist and a fine or something. We certainly are not punishing corporations anywhere as much as we should around the world, and honestly, that is something that I think should happen. Like, if we started to really severely fine / break up monopolies and punish rich elite people, then it might create a massive balancing force. And maybe we need to do something as crazy and controversial as, you know what, if a company does something wrong, the fines don't go directly back to the citizens or the lawyers, but they go into a political slush fund that just funds the campaign of politicians around the world. Maybe that is something crazy enough that it might just work. Then rich people either have to fund individual people's campaigns a lot more, or they are at risk of the money going to politicians. Although that idea is probably pretty stupid, because then you could see Trump in particular fining and proceeding it with fines against companies he doesn't like that didn't support him, while granting amnesty to companies that he does like. So yeah, I guess the better, smarter move would just to be get rid of funding of politicians altogether from rich people and corporations. But yeah, there definitely needs to be some kind of revolutionary new thinking to get money out of politics and allow a rebalancing of powers between big giant monopolies like Microsoft and tiny small groups of workers like CWA. Let's see, this game monitor looks like just a low effort puzzle game. Yeah, I just don't think that there's enough game here that I'd give this a chance. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle says Nintendo support articles show the inside of the new Switch Joy-Cons with removable battery. So the Joy-Cons themselves are going to have more of a removable battery, although I don't know how easy it is going to be to really access and remove the batteries. I question what removable battery really is going to end up meaning if it is some weird connector and having to take the whole thing apart. I was thinking about the wireless charging technology that they announced as being prototypes for electric vehicles, where you just have like a mat on your driveway or in your garage, and the car would just line up itself automatically to the charger and charge wirelessly, and so you don't have to plug something in every time. And I looked it up, and it seems like those prototypes have not gone anywhere since then. Here we have another game tagged sexual content that's not in the adult section. But yeah, that's kind of a shame, because the idea of wireless charging for like wheelchairs, electrical vehicles, scooters, things like that does sound appealing, although it probably is also a case that electrical vehicles in particular are pushing so much electricity anyways that going through wireless is just going to slow down your charge time to an unacceptable amount. Star Ocean, the second story R, is now available for Switch 2. No upgrade from the Switch version, apparently. Which, that's a weird way to describe things, but it's probably somewhat accurate as far as how a lot of Switch 2 games come out, is that there's very little change. Gaming on Linux says Proton Experimental brings fixes for Diablo 4, Marvel Rivals, and the RPG Maker engine games, which my own personal bias would kind of prefer that RPG Maker engine games didn't get any improvement on Proton, but realistically it is better to make games work. Apparently all RPG Maker engine games were freezing after being minimized inside of game scope, or a lot of them at least. Some of this is getting to a point where games are getting updated, like Diablo 4 or Marvel Rivals, very frequently, and Proton is just working extra hard to make sure those games continue to work. And at some point here, maybe these submissions to Proton need to come directly from the makers of Diablo 4 and Marvel Rivals, although I'm not sure that they aren't some of the same people submitting that kind of updates. Here's Machine Party, which, yeah, is an online co-op game, probably friend bait, streamer bait type game, friend slop type game. I'm gonna say no to this one. David Beckham has joined the latest footballer to arrive in Fortnite. He joins previous guest skins like Messi, Vinny Jr., and Harry Kane. I'd assume this is David Beckham here, and I'd assume he really does have all these tattoos, but probably not in gold. Yeah, if you injected yourself with even a small amount of gold, you'll more than likely die. Like injecting any kind of heavy metal would likely kill you. Fortnite seems like every time it gets a new skin, a new update, it is getting weirder and weirder as far as what's really going on. Yeah, we are going to hit a point, I think, fairly quickly here where we're just going to be looking at the remaining games on Steam, and we'll be through all the news. Here we have Gamatsu with Mario Tennis Fever update, which they are giving you more of a text changelog here for what's being added or changed. Gamatsu doing a much better job of doing that. Games on the go with the new Humble Handhelds bundle. Interesting. Is that something we're going to see fairly frequently, and that it will just be games that run really good on the Steam Deck or other handhelds? And there's going to just be those kinds of humble bundles. I don't think Sympathy of War really catches my attention. Of course, if I got this bundle, if I had any extra money after buying a whole new dryer, I could get probably 3 games that are on my wish list and 1 game that isn't, and still save money. Yeah. Children of Morta was definitely one I was thinking about playing at some point, but there frankly are just long lists of games now that I was thinking about playing that now nowhere close to it. I'm a little iffy on this one. The really low resolution pixely graphics kind of are too big of a turn off, I think. Yeah, I'm still gonna say no. Although I guess I can make a YouTube short and not be too big of a deal. Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced will receive a new Game Plus mode, which I guess is interesting because I don't believe Assassin's Creed games had new Game Plus modes until probably after the game after Origins. I don't know if there's really a good reason to have a new Game Plus mode. The original Assassin's Creed games, there definitely wouldn't have been a real reason to have new Game Plus modes. Even Assassin's Creed 2's trilogy of games, even though it did have a few different kinds of items you could find and use, still wasn't randomly generating loot or procedurally generating loot. So either Black Flag does have procedurally generated loot, or they added it to justify a new Game Plus and going back and doing it a second time. And yeah, I've never heard anybody really talk about the story of Assassin's Creed Black Flag, which definitely feels like they just don't care about the actual story in Black Flag. Which is very believable. Alright, this is probably nothing, but I'm going to give that a follow. Yeah. This one's already out. Era for Switch 2 launches July 30th. We just looked at that game on Steam. Yeah, I wish more people talked about the anime Iria, but IRIA, but that's also like a 70s or 80s sci-fi anime that is not really relevant these days. Oh, I got slick deals for a ceiling mounted TV mount, and that wasn't really what I was planning on doing with one of my TVs, but honestly, it's not a terrible thought for where I want to put it. So I guess if I can find a beam to install it on, and that really works, then I may just mount a TV to a ceiling, which that's always a worthy concern, certainly, as far as having a TV mounted to a ceiling. It's not generally the best way. I may very well just keep the mount and use it somewhere else if needed be. Would let me get rid of a couple more pieces of furniture, which, yeah, I definitely have probably 10 pieces of furniture I would be happy enough to sell if I could get any money from them. Let's see, Jagex Launcher's Linux beta released for old school RuneScape. This is gaming on Linux. I think this is probably also, we'll give this one a follow, a good point to take a bathroom break, since this is going to be kind of weird stream anyway, so I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Immediately start coughing too. Alright, so we have a Video Games Chronicle article. Fortnite has started adding AI voices to its NPCs for the upcoming Conversations feature. Voices will be used in Gemini-powered conversations on user-created islands. Okay. So I guess that is where the AI comes down, is that Gemini is powering the conversations. Increasingly, I do think people are going to start calling text-to-speech AI and anything that even feels computer-generated AI, when what we are thinking of when we say AI nowadays are large language modules. And even that is not really artificial intelligence by any realistic definition of the word. Yeah, Fortnite is just getting weirder and weirder. Seems with every update, which probably means it's also kind of getting desperate to just have anything and everything in it. Which, yeah, certainly Terraria was popular, but there was certainly also a point in which it felt like Terraria was adding just a ton of stuff into it to try and somehow maintain the level of popularity that Minecraft had. Or Palworld might be a better example, in that Palworld seems to have a lot of stuff in it that maybe it doesn't really need to just try and be popular. But Fortnite by far is a much worse example of just adding random stuff. But yeah, certainly if I do start making YouTube Shorts again, I do have a fear of people just calling it AI slop. Although they're probably going to call it AI slop no matter what, even if it totally doesn't come anywhere close to that. So it's a fear to really just get over than actually worry about. Let's see, Beacon Fall. Tower defense game. I think not. Lagrangier Sea of Sword has been announced for PC, iOS, and Android. Which I half wonder if I should just watch the trailers. Let's do a triple watch here. It's English, Japanese, and Korean. We can do a comparison to see if the trailers are any different. Which is always kind of fun. That's another thing about shorts, is that either I lose quite a lot of pixels to avoid all the buttons that show up in shorts, or I just leave it as it is. And there's a good reason to leave it as it is, because the idea of a full screen mode is likely going to happen in shorts pretty quickly. Looks to me like the Japanese one, it just has Japanese subtitles at the bottom. I bet that's true for the Korean one too. As for the actual game, seems like we've already seen two different kinds of art styles, and it definitely feels like we're just looking at a cutscene of some sort. So it's not going to really tell me anything, as I can't hear the audio, so maybe it's explaining a lot more audio wise, but visually I don't see a lot. And now we're seeing pencil sketches of characters, which I think would bring us to a third animation style. Trailers were all, for the most part, the same as far as what was actually being shown. But yeah, we do have another art style, it feels like now. So yeah, it feels like we saw 4 different art styles, not counting the thumbnail cover. Which tells me very little. Let's see, Minecraft 26.3 Snapshot 4 brings SDL3 and prefers Wayland on Linux, which may very well mean that there is a future where Minecraft on Linux runs even better than it does on Windows, which I just started to watch the WAN Tech Show with Linus Tech Tips being one of the presenters, and first thing they said is that Microsoft has admitted that they have a unique tracking number with every Windows install, and that they are sharing that to spy, using it to spy on you, and sharing it with government agencies to spy on you, which I don't know why people really would have thought that there was a chance that that wasn't happening. Almost certainly everybody has the potential of being spied on, and probably has been spied on. Yeah, privacy died probably around 2001 9/11, if not well before then. Yeah, and if you're really going to be hardcore about privacy, you probably aren't going to have, you're probably better to not have computer technology involved in the first place. Put this on the follow list, this might be something. Yeah, the Apple TV show Silo has a new season. They're getting a couple episodes out, and it has something to do with privacy. In one of the scenes they talk about that. Yeah, we'll have to see if season 3 continues to maintain my interest, and it might be better to marathon season 3 once it's done. There's a couple other Apple TV things I could catch up and watch, and I'm watching Stargate Infinity, a terrible kids cartoon with the Stargate involved loosely, on Prime Video right now. Probably watching too much TV and streaming anyways. Video Games Chronicle says the live-action God of War show is recasting Kratos after Ryan Hurst was injured on the set. Production has been paused after Hurst tore his bicep. Well, that does tell me that either there was a really fluke accident, or they were having him wander around on a forest and tripped over something, or do something physical instead of a stunt man, or he tripped on a stage. Yeah. Which this also kind of feels. Yeah, he was filming a stunt, they say. This feels like he probably just wanted off the project, and that might have been a good excuse to be off the project anyways. But it may also very well be the case that they hadn't shot that much, and it was just easier to recast him. I imagine it's a pay or play type contract, so he's probably going to get paid what he was going to get paid anyways, if not more, for being injured. Of course, an injury can haunt you for the rest of your life, and is worth potentially infinite amounts of money for the pain and suffering you're going to go through. But yeah, it's kind of good news that this was the decision that was made. I guess the question is, who's really in charge of developing this? Sony Pictures Television and Amazon's MGM Studios. You could easily see Amazon and Sony just cancel the project, particularly since the next game, God of War Laufey, is not really going to center around Kratos or the boy, so the live action here only at most is going to be a live action game show being made in hopes to either get a completely different audience or create a new audience that will then go and play Laufey. We haven't heard any claims that Lao Fei plays a big role at all in the live action show. But yeah, the fact that they recast and then cancel is surprising. Although, in fairness, it may very well still get canceled. Alright, so there's something interesting here. First of all, this feels like this might be AI generated capsule art, but it's not tagged as AI. I can only say that much. But it presents an interesting idea. When we look at the very small number of screenshots here, this kind of feels like an old school Game Boy Zelda game. And when you have that tiny resolution, the character stands out kind of badly with the white hair and the white background. Stands out more with the green background. So yeah, it's an interesting thought as far as how you have this muscly lady being depicted as protagonist, and that's not really what you see in the actual game. I mean, imagine if you were playing a Game Boy version of Zelda or Link's Awakening, and then you had hyper-realistic Breath of the Wild Link in the cover art. That would be pretty inaccurate. That does seem to be the case for games. No reason I'm going to actually put that game on the follow list or make a short on it, but yeah, we still do seem like there's just far too distinctively different types of art styles in the advertising versus what's actually delivered on. And RPG Maker and Game Maker type games are by far the worst offenders in that case, where they're asset flipping pixel art characters that are very, very low res, and then often using AI to make the cover art. Let's see, Final Fantasy Resonance Pixel Trailer. The latest details and screenshots are available from Gematsu.com. Here we have another prime example of this. I did see someone talking about the third Final Fantasy VII game, and apparently that is the point where the character who died is supposed to die, and so it is a matter of that third game to see if the story changes in this alternate telling or if something weird happens. But yeah. If they were smart, I would think it probably would make sense to not have that character die, and then allow that to create a continuation where you can't call the game Final Fantasy VIII as far as the next game that would continue with those characters, but maybe you could call it Final Fantasy XIV. Is there a Final Fantasy XIV that's been made? Or maybe you just call it 7-2. Or maybe you spin it off into its own series. But yeah, even if that wasn't anywhere as a possibility when they first did the series, it would make a lot of sense to do it now, because more recent Final Fantasy games have not really succeeded well. So going back and focusing on the ones that did succeed probably would make some sense now. This feels like it's more of a mobile focused game than a console game for what it's being shown. I do think that, again, gamers may be too much sheep in that they just seem to give games with Final Fantasy in front of them too much of a chance, instead of really approaching it cautiously and making sure it's actually a game that reviews well before they jump in and buy it. Let's see. The Steam VR beta gets a big update ahead of the Steam Frame release. This is from Gaming on Linux 2.17.4 of the Steam VR beta. Which, yeah, it does feel to me what they have done here is they've taken the big picture Steam Deck mode and taken all the options and settings and put it to the left and put all of the notifications of like a desktop mode at the bottom here. Interesting that there's 2 batteries being shown. I wouldn't be surprised if that's 2 batteries for controllers. I don't know what these 2 monitors really mean. They probably mean something. There is definitely a thought at going to a VR headset at some point if it gets light enough, if the battery's good enough. We probably still are decades from that point, and it still would need to be powerful enough to at least do a decent amount of gaming without just streaming things. It, at the current time, still feels like if you were to get Steam VR, you need a powerful computer to stream most games to it, and that probably means that what you're seeing is not going to really do anything special as far as VR inputs, and it is very questionable at this point whether owning a Steam machine to stream games to a Steam VR headset even makes any sense at all. And that is why I assume they did not release the Steam VR headset at the same time as announcing the Steam machine. Video Games Chronicle says Sony killing physical game doesn't matter at all, according to GameStop CEO. Of course, GameStop CEO at the moment, Ryan Cohen, is pretty wild and crazy. And I remember he was trying to do a weird reverse bid to buy eBay with not having enough money to actually be able to acquire eBay. He's saying software today makes up less than 12% of their business and collectibles make up over half of the business, so it's totally irrelevant. Well, 12% of anybody's business would not be irrelevant. So yeah, they're definitely making the argument that GameStop is no longer in the business of selling video games and is now in the business of selling Pokemon trading cards and collectibles and things. And certainly I've heard that there's been more of that, but it's probably been over 10 years since I last stepped into a GameStop. And yeah, the GameStop online site I may have looked at a few years back, and yeah. I don't know what you would have really expected Ryan Cohen to say if he was going to say anything at all. Like, it would have been pretty crazy if he came out and said, oh, this totally matters. I think it probably matters a lot more than he's implying. Certainly matters to consumers. I certainly still know people that go to GameStop and try and trade in games and trade in consoles. And they just would not be in the console infrastructure if they weren't buying used. So yeah, I think it does matter. And I think this is a lot of copium that he's trying to apply. Yeah, I don't think I'd do anything with that. It's been a weird day in that I don't know why this is open. Nico Odyssey. Really haven't been a lot of games to add to the follow list today. So that's probably pretty typical. Let's see, Nico Odyssey is coming to the Switch on July 30th, which is interesting that they're saying Switch, not Switch 2. You would think we'd be approaching a point where they would say you can no longer release a new game on the Switch. See, the explosive isometric insurgent simulator Brigador Killers arrives in August. Okay, I'll put that on the follow list. Here we have a mixed reviewed game. Already, Class of 09 Puzzle Showdown. I feel like the Class of 09 series has been kind of weird, and I don't know if it's ever been good. Let's see if we can look at some of the other games. Class of 09, Class of 09 Re-Up, and Class of 09 Flip Side. So yeah, you definitely can see that there's this implication of perhaps more lewd imagery, but not really seem to really exist. The animation style seems rough. The flip side here is 56% positive overall. The re-up, on the other hand, is overly positive. What's really weird about this, despite this weird art style, is just the massive amount of reviews that we see here. This is just way more reviews that any other visual novel is likely going to have. Like even something like the Fate series or Steins Gate, I wonder if it would have that many reviews. And see, this might very well be part of the problem, is that the gimmick visual novels, in this case it's not a dating sim, it's a rejection sim where you're just like rejecting people, I guess, catch people's attention more or get advertised and pushed more. But also clearly this 2021 concept may have been a funny gimmick in the first case, and now they're milking it way too much. So there's this story, I'm not sure we've talked about it too much, but Microsoft has finally apparently done the right thing by restoring a hacked account in baby pictures, but the owner still says it's a little bit shady. An Xbox fan's Microsoft account basically was deleted after it was hacked. And yeah, it does seem to me like they only restored it because a lot about but yeah, the policies definitely should never have existed, that they would have deleted something that quickly, or said they deleted something that quickly, and that should not have been the case that we're just going to delete an account because it got hacked instead of restoring proper access to the account to the right people. Yeah, and I definitely wouldn't trust Microsoft after that situation. I would definitely go with either Amazon or Google Not that they're guaranteed to be any better, but at least we haven't heard any stories like this. And recently, at least, of accounts just being totally deleted. The game Volcano Princess is coming to the PS5, Switch, iOS, and Android on July 30th. Steam version will receive a free update in October. It looks like it might be a daughter-raising simulator game, if I was to guess. Yep, raise a daughter in a world of swords and sorcery. Which it's nice to see more of those. It would be nice to see more of those actually be good. This is like a Matsu article. Valve says that Team Fortress 2 MVM update is still coming and that they're still working on it. I don't know what MVM even stands for. But yeah. I guess we have to leave it at that, since I really just don't know even what that is. I don't know why there's two tabs with the same article open in that case. Team Fortress is in my library, as it is in most people's library, but it is also multiplayer only, so I'm not going to ever make any footage on it. And I don't think too many people are making footage on those types of games, even if there are a decent number of people that are still playing it. And at a certain level, I guess I can't hate on people that found the game and they like to play it and they're just playing it for years on years and years, versus people who are just sheep and move to the next biggest game over and over again. Yeah. See, Mii's are back in the Nintendo Switch Sports Resort, and fans are debating their funny proportions. Nintendo Switch Sports Resort will feature Mii characters, but they have been stretched. Yeah, they replaced Mii's too with just more realistic anatomy characters. Alright, here we have a Reddit post that's been deleted. Reddit's trying to push more people to go to Reddit and not actually see it through embedded posts and things like that. I would question, you probably are going to have to make the Mii's from scratch, and these may be Mii's in name only, in that they really are in no way really connected to the file format that Mii's were. The fact that the Switch 1 and the Switch 2 both launched and there really wasn't any thought of any kind of avatar to put in games shows how little of a feature that really is, and how uninteresting of a feature it really is. Which I do think that's the case, as most people just don't need a character creator in their game or a custom character in their game in the first place. And trying to have a system level avatar is an interesting idea, but it's something that didn't really catch on for the vast majority of games that don't use avatars. The only way this really would work as far as system level avatars is if everybody was using the same engine and the same art formats for the 3D modeling. Yeah. I don't think it would make my footage on my channel particularly better if I had an avatar that was consistent between games. I mean, nothing else is consistent between games. You should just have different characters that you play as. In a lot of ways, I guess Mii's are dangerously close to the idea of like Tom Cruise being in every single movie. If you could just AI replace all other actors with Tom Cruise, would you want that? Or if you could have Tom Cruise just be the actor in all all the different movies, would you really want that? Or is it much more reasonable that you go to a movie, there are different actors that look different for different characters? Yeah. Let's see. Moving on, Lose Lagoon adds a Switch 2 version. You can watch 10 minutes of the Switch 2 gameplay. This is a Gamatsu article. I don't think I really recognize that game. You can race down a mountain in this ridiculous looking shooter called Deathlon. There's a triathlon game on my follow list, and I question whether I would really want to play a game that just simulates a Olympic sport like the triathlon, which is a weird Olympic sport in itself. This is an interesting idea. It effectively is an on-rail shooter, but with skiing being the rails, which that could be fun. Now, do I even want to make a YouTube short on the Final Ascent? No. Let's see. The European Union set to approve the Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund acquisition of EA, according to report. Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund is reportedly a step closer to acquiring EA. I feel like this is such an old story, I've forgotten about it. And we do really get to this weird situation where do we think EA is going to be in any better state if it is acquired by Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund versus being left in the hands of the people currently running EA and running EA into the ground? There is a decent argument that if it gets acquired, to recoup some of that investment, they might sell off a lot of intellectual property from EA and just hold on to the EA Sports games, at which point things like Alice Madness Returns might go on the sales block. I don't know if I really want American McGee to be the owner of Alice Madness Returns, but it might be interesting, certainly, to see it if a lot of their IP was in different hands, whether that's Saudi Arabia's hands or just whoever they sell it to's hands. I don't know specifically whether the European Union would approve this, but yeah, I would assume there's a reason that's going over my head. Let's see. Moving on, Gamatsu says Printing Party Going Overboard launches November 12th in Japan and Asia, and it is coming to the West, I guess, at some time. This is a Mario Party type game, I would assume, with the Printy NIS characters. It's funny how NIS has this whole collection of characters from their games, but it hasn't gained really enough popularity that Printy, the penguin, would even be recognizable to your average gamer in the West. Yeah. I tried to play one of those games and didn't get very far in it before it just bored me. Those positional placement strategy games are just too slow for me. You know what, that's probably true for JRPGs too, and I've never really thought of it that way, but it is probably at a point now where I should sit down and reevaluate, just with my lack of endurance / attention span as I get older, how many games I should even really give a chance to or try to play versus how many games should I say, you know what, I'm just not going to make it to the end of it. A lot of JRPGs in particular don't give you a great path to minimalistically play a game or speedrun a game. So there is a real possibility. A lot of the games I also used to look at how long to beat, but I haven't really thought in those terms recently. But yeah, how long to beat would be a good source of information as far as if I'm going to try and play the JRPG game. And I guess for the most part, the JRPG games I would think I might play is maybe a Dragon Quest, maybe an AMD Ryzen game, maybe Final Fantasy games, maybe not. I'll put this one on the fall list. Bandwagon is a survivors-like adventure that sounds wonderful from the Dome Keepers devs, according to Gaming on Linux. But yeah, I don't think I would get too deep into JRPG games. This looks like nothing. Let's see, Final Fantasy XIV's mobile global launch has been cancelled. Final Fantasy Mobile is being shut down in China and a global release has been cancelled. That feels like quite the shift. Not sure if there's really any good reason for that. I imagine it's probably just it didn't have a lot of chances of making enough money. I did see that Hong Kong just arrested a bookstore owner for selling a book that the Chinese government / Hong Kong didn't like. Yeah, generally I think Hong Kong has basically been under a total fascist lockdown for years now. Yeah. But yeah, I haven't heard a lot of news making it past Hong Kong censors. Let's see, Obaki Doro 2 Chase and Seek launches August 6th worldwide. I feel like the first one of these games only came out maybe 6 months to a year ago, although it might be fairly easy to make a sequel. DayZ Badlands gets a fresh teaser and is set to launch in October. Okay. Really shouldn't be watching trailers, but probably would be somewhat helpful to know what this game looks like. Yeah, and today's going to be another weird day. Well, in general, it's just always going to be a weird day, I think, in that the sleeping in and waking up late doesn't really help much. And over the past couple of months, I've been saying over the weekend I need to do this, mostly work on the router, and I haven't gotten around to doing it, so I think at this point it's pointless to even make plans as far as what I'm actually going to do. For the most part, all I can really do is accomplish what small things I decide to do in that instant, and then just try to enjoy life otherwise. Certainly if I was working for someone else, they'd probably fire me for not getting enough done. Yeah, DayZ is an MMO that set more of a forested area, so the Badlands definitely set more in a desert-like area. This Hollow Alchemist looks like it might be something, so I'll put it on the follow list. Okay, so here's that story I talked about earlier from Video Games Chronicle this time. Bethesda has confirmed that an Obsidian Fallout game and Fallout 5 is in pre-production. Okay, we had already seen rumors of an Obsidian Fallout game. You could have generally assumed that a Fallout 5 was in pre-production because basically it would have been in pre-production the second Fallout 4 was released. Remasters of Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas are also on their way. It's the new news. Remasters, I assume, are just going to be performance improvements. I can't even really assume that there's going to be any bug fixes, significantly speaking. Remember, Fallout 3 already has a Game of the Year edition that basically is a remaster. And I do have real concern that they are just going to add microtransactions in the marketplace and the horse armor nonsense to it and call it a remaster. This is also potentially maybe a hint that either Bethesda is greenlighting projects that Microsoft really isn't greenlighting, or Microsoft is still putting way too much into Bethesda. And certainly I don't think most people would agree with the idea that Xbox should have laid off and shut down a bunch of companies just to give Bethesda more money to remaster Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas. There won't be a Fallout broadcast this year. Honestly, Fallout Day broadcast sounds ridiculous. But the company will celebrate the 30th anniversary of the franchise with fans in 2027. I wouldn't be surprised if most of these don't actually come to fruition and we just see Todd Howard get laid off, Bethesda itself get reorganized severely, if not shut down. Yeah. They may very well just be projecting or lying to sell Bethesda, and I don't know who could even buy Bethesda. That may very well be the reason why we haven't heard too much news about the Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund, is that they've been in the process of acquiring EA. If that acquisition goes through, I wouldn't be surprised if they do start to focus in on acquiring other companies, and Bethesda could be one, certainly. Let's move on. Fix Force is already on the follow list, so I'll leave it there. Guild Run looks pretty, so I'll give it a follow. Yeah, Guild Run is a roguelike auto battler announced for PC. I question whether you want auto battlers on PC, but whatever. Here we have Gaming on Linux saying Bethesda roadmap, more Fallout is coming, Starfield support continues, but Elder Scrolls 6 is the main priority, which is to say we're still doing everything and we're not really changing anything. They're even mentioning Fallout Shelter, which you could have easily quietly ignored, and you could have, and definitely they are scaling down Elder Scrolls Online. And they could have also quietly not updated Fallout 76. They are kind of going in circles now, and that Elder Scrolls Online is being de-emphasized, and yet Fallout 76 is also a game as a service online game, and so there's some weirdness there. They're really not saying anything different than what they would have said 2 months, 6 months ago. That they're working on an Elder Scrolls game, Elder Scrolls 6, and whatever technology they learn and improve upon on Elder Scrolls 6 would then have been shoved into Fallout 5. And that's been pretty much it. Starfield obviously is not going to get a sequel. Fallout 76 is a side project. Remasters are going to be a side project. There is potentially a interesting move there where you could have had games being remastered by other teams under Xbox, such as the Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice team, and it would have been fairly interesting to see what kind of cutscenes they would have filmed or shot to replace the graphics of something like Fallout 3 or Fallout New Vegas. But I bet that's not really what happens. I imagine these remasters are going to be extremely similar to what the games are now. I would say in Fallout New Vegas there's definitely enough bugs in it that could be improved, and there is, I feel like, a lack of a linear story experience that you get more of in Fallout 3. In Fallout 3, you start in a shelter and you get a lot of tutorial going there. Then you tend to go all the way up slowly towards the top right, and then you tend to have to go all the way to the bottom left, and then eventually all the way back to the top right. And then there's some side quests that'll take you to the bottom right, and it's pretty easy to miss the top left experience. And it's fairly open, but then there also are main quests pointing you around this big flat square area. Whereas in New Vegas, you start in a tutorial city that lasts a very short amount of time, and you are forced to go to the right to a road, and then basically forced to go south, and then around the bottom, and then up. And there's a lot less distractions to see, and depending on what region of the map you're in is going to severely affect who you run into and what kind of enemies you're fighting. You would think when you're down at the bottom here, there would have been a split in which you could have potentially early on joined Caesar's army, but no, it's very hard to join Caesar's army. So almost everybody's playthrough, you're going to be joining the Rangers and the California Republic side. You're just going to, from the bottom, work your way up and slowly make it to New Vegas. And when you get into New Vegas, then there's just a lot of casinos that you could waste a lot of time in. Then a little bit of random directions you might go in, particularly if you're chasing down specific side quests, but pretty quickly you are setting yourself up for the final wrap up in the top right corner of the map. It's too linear for an open world game, and there isn't anywhere as many small events stuff. But you could go either way if you were going to really remake and not just remaster New Vegas. You could make it an incredibly linear experience where you have to do something and you just have that experience, which would be okay for a lot of people. Or you could try and make it a much bigger, much more open world experience where you get out of that starting area and you're just in the center of the map and you can just go in any direction. Ideally, I would think if you're making a center of the map open world game, things should be pretty safe and easy in the center, and as you go out further, you hit potentially more radiation and stronger enemies. And then you could have potentially a faction directly in each corner of the map to go take on and fight, and probably not join. But, yeah, and I don't even know what you're going to really do when you're remastering Fallout 3. It's just going to be graphics, I would assume. There's very little other things I'd like you to change in Fallout 3 other than maybe adding some more side quests on the top left, maybe making the top center part of the city more transversable. Certainly if you're going to fully remake it, you'd have bigger buildings and just more of everything, but yeah, there was a lot of places where you'd have to go down through a tunnel or subway to get from one point of the city to another. Moving on, the Famitsu sales from the 6th to the 12th have been updated. Again, we'll see heavy dominance. Rhythm, Heaven, Groove being the #1 seller. And then Magical Girl Witch Trials, the second seller. Yeah, Black Flag PS5 makes it into the 4th spot. I don't know what the re-synchro part of the title means there. Followed by Echoes of Aincrad. So Sword Art Online still big enough to get people to play it. 16,000 people in Japan play it. Followed by Switch 2 version of Digimon Story Time Stranger. Yeah, followed by a Nintendo Switch 1 version of that. So actually a pretty good week for PlayStation compared to how many weeks PlayStation barely had anything, which also perhaps means that in Japan the argument about discs going away hasn't really been received the same way or reacted to in the same way. Still, though, there's a massive difference in the number of Switch 2s being sold on a weekly basis versus PlayStation 5 digital editions being sold. And yeah, Xbox Series X, not even worth mentioning how many units are being sold. Yeah. Also saw some news stories that the Japanese parliament has passed some weird laws just allowing the emperor's reign to continue by having them adopt more distant relatives, and male relatives in particular, because they are unwilling to pass the lineage down to female descendants. Like, the reality is they're coming directly into a clash between what they pretty obviously should do, which is just say the emperor is only a figurehead, or the emperor should just go away, and their tradition of wanting to have an emperor, which if you look at the UK too, they've also struggled to get to the even close to the point where they start talking about doing away with the monarchy. Yeah, I mean, it is not even as difficult of a thing as the lineage and the succession orders do allow for the succession to pass through females in the UK. Yeah. The idea of any kind of royal authority still being necessary to establish law and order in a country is kind of ridiculous. But the particularly conservative old people that run the parliament and Japan's government certainly are still going to be on that side. See, an arcade comedy sports game, Pro Jank Footy, launches August 12th for modern consoles, Switch, and PC. Take note that I just ignored and closed that tab without saying anything because it did not look interesting enough. This barely looks interesting enough, but I'll give it a follow. Still feels like we've got some Balatro style or inspired things. Hella of Mice and Magic launches in Q4 of 2026, which in fairness means I probably should still take it off the follow list. Hot Wheels Infinite Rush has been announced. Well, its release date has been moved up to September 10th. But yeah. I do kind of feel like Hot Wheels is just like popular with kids for a very short amount of time. Probably when they're fairly young. And there's very few people. Darn it, dropped my mouse again. I need to basically have a backup mouse ready to go when this happens. It'd also be helpful if I just had a table. There we go. All right. But yeah, it's questionable whether Hot Wheels video games are relevant or not. And with these new hotkeys, I'm also holding on to the keyboard on my other leg with the mouse pad on this one. So yeah, I really just need the table in front of me. Let's see, Marvel Token Fighting Souls open beta test set for July 24th through 26th, according to Gamatsu. So we're moving closer to people actually being able to try it out. Of course, if I did have a table in front of me, that'd be one more thing in the way when I'm running off to the bathroom. Okay. Does this game of Rebirth look like anything of interest? No. You know what? I really haven't had to complain about too many games with just like visual distractions on it, where it's just like a ton of bright colored particles. So it seems like that's stopped being a trend, which is interesting. I saw an Exit 8 clone like this game, not really like this game, but similar to this game, that was on a subway, and it was like anime waifu girls were on the subway, and so if there was something weird as far as an anomaly, you had to turn back and walk away, which certainly does put a new twist on the idea of an anomaly detection game, in that there might be characters talking to you, distracting you, or otherwise giving you hints. And certainly you could see where you would take the general concept of detecting a difference or an anomaly and apply it to a dating sim pretty easily, as far as if somebody tells you something about themselves and then they tell you something different, you back away because they're not the same person or because they're a liar. But yeah, I could see a whole thing where you have like a dating app and it becomes more like a Papers, Please type game, where you're dating these people and determining whether they lied on their profile or whether they made a significant enough lie on their profile. Cozy Marbles now has a launch date. I'm still looking for a good Marvel game, so I'm a little hopeful this might be it. Launching August 20th according to Gamatsu. It's chopping time. It doesn't look interesting enough for me. Vision Quench launches Q1 of 2027. I Don't know exactly what kind of game that is. No. Parallel Farm. Looks way too simplistic. I guess you should applaud games like this where it seems like they did try to hand draw the art instead of just using AI. But, I mean, what can you really do other than applaud it? It's definitely not a game I'd want to buy and play. Roman Sands Rebuild launches September 16th. I don't recognize this game, and I would assume Rebuild would imply that this is a remake of something, but I don't think it actually is. Well, there might be something to this, so I'm going to put it on the follow list. Yeah. Flame Up doesn't look that interesting. RTS Pure Imagination launches in Q1 of 2027. Marvel's Wolverine's Ain't No Hero trailer is available on Gematsu if you want to see that. We're still going through Gematsu articles. But yeah. As the weirdness, I suppose, of the integration here is that when everything is mixed together, it does seem to go forever as far as stream news. Let's see, co-op cleaning game with a Dungeon Daddy update. Yeah, I don't know if there's really a game here I'd want to play. This is like Viscera cleanup if it was set in the fantasy world, but with the idea of a Dungeon Daddy being introduced, I wonder if there's just more of a lewdness being implied. Although it's not really implying too much lewdness. Goblin Cleanup is coming to PS5, Xbox Series, and Switch 2 in 2027. Metro Architect. Yeah, this looks way too much like a spreadsheet type game. So that's going to be a no for me, dog. It's Wilder Dark, looks interesting. I'll put that on the follow list. It launches November 3rd. We have Quiet Order. Seems like some kind of Sudoku variant type puzzle. Maybe not Sudoku. AO Oni 2 is coming to the Switch and Steam on August 6th. Includes the brand new scenario AO Oni Seaside School. Yeah, it's probably not a game I would be interested in. Yeah, and certainly we are seeing a lot less of the absolute garbage games by eliminating AI disclosures. Although we may be missing a few games, I don't think we're missing that many. Final Fantasy XIV Mobile to end service on September 30th in China with the global version cancelled. It does seem to me like Final Fantasy XIV may have had kind of inconsistent character designs as a thing. There is a possibility that something was made illegal, unallowed, or unlicensed in this game, and there is also just a possibility that the new regulations and laws around video games and censorship around video games in China makes a lot of games no longer viable and profitable. Yeah. As there is more and more unemployment, I don't expect we're going to see other countries allow people to just end up playing video games the whole time. As they have nothing else that they can do in gold farming and stuff like that. Put that game previously on a follow list. You know what? I'll even give this a follow list too. I'll even give Kalapali. We are starting to see 2 or 3 Steam games for every Gematsu article. Kalapali launches on August 20th. Escape the Beach. Doesn't look like there's anything here. Moss Palace Parade. Does look like it might be interesting. Zenless Zone Zero version 3.1 update The Long Goodbye launches July 29th. You can see that this is very positive. I think kind of an in-app purchase mobile game though. Which, yeah, I haven't found any game like this that really catches my attention. But there is definitely an argument that maybe if I did find something like that that caught my attention and I was doing dailies, I would then stop doing dailies on my mobile phones and start doing dailies making some kind of live stream or footage, which probably wouldn't help my channel in any way unless it was super popular. That's the thing, is it would have to be super popular on YouTube to justify. I'm not even gonna bother to put this on the follow list, but I will make a short on it. Yeah, I could see doing it if it was really popular. Of course, that also kills the idea of the being able to play games when you're not in front of your computer, having your computer do something else. But yeah, now since I no longer have to run the YouTube Shorts macro after these streams, I really just should start scheduling videos. At least that would make some sense. But yeah, I don't want to do any follow list cleanup in that form factor. And that does mean that because things were all mixed up, we are now abruptly done with the stream, which I am again shocked in that this seems, even with a bathroom break, to have only taken 2 hours and 43 minutes. But I guess it is kind of a slow Friday too. Well, that's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep